There have been 1,472 executions in America since.
Yep. It's another time for another episode of Requiem Radio. And with the new year upon us, it's 2024. I'm back. Your favorite schizo. Out of all the schizos you probably follow, stalk online, treat as a pedestrian, and mock by buying a honey bun and microwaving it for a considerably long time to horribly and irreparably scar that person who happens to be impoverished. Easy Dialects with my co-host, who's always here as ever, with some curtailed questions to make Bayern look bad. Solemn Requiem. How you doing today?
What's with the honey bun thing? You good? What are you doing with honey buns? I just heard you say that. Like, what's my brother doing over here?
What's my man's cooking?
Oh God. Yeah. Good to see you guys. Thank you for joining us for season 3 Requiem Radio. We got a lot of plans in the future, some general discussion, and just seeing where we could roll from this. But I'm excited that we've actually made it this far. I'm glad to see how much we're growing as a brand and as a product. And I'm looking forward to having more and more exclusive, interesting guests on for your entertainment.
With season 2, I think it's good to do a little bit of a retrospective, see where everything went wrong. Why are we on a wanted poster? Why are we still getting hate? We worked out the nooks and crannies of figuring out how to engage with certain guests who come on to really delve out the knowledge about particular topics, analysis they've done about the world, and we've had an array of guests who have even delved into psychedelics. So it's very fascinating to have all these unique personalities on. When it comes to the most recent season of Requiem Radio, I have to ask you, Solo, what is one of the things you felt was the most viable lesson you learned in terms of engaging with particular guests?
I'd say for me, definitely getting a good grasp on their personality beforehand, because there's some guests who we've had on that are very bold and ambitious people. And definitely, it's almost like you got to change the way you interview and ask them questions or kind of roll with them, because what we do, and this is really interviewing in general, like a good interviewer, they don't set to the same script every single time. They bend a little bit to fit, the person and bring out the best person. And I think me and you have this discussion all the time. My goal for our guests on a podcast is to bring out the best of them possibly. So what is the best we can make them look for their given subject matter? So definitely that, getting to know people ahead of time and be like, all right, this is a new strength, basically.
For me personally, it's definitely really honing in on whatever intentions someone has when coming on the podcast. Sometimes you just want to speak very candidly or concisely about a particular topic, and I think refining my ability to let them speak in that manner and maximize that facet of whatever particular interest invites them onto the podcast is something I've very much become hyper-focused upon. So having a really good idea as to where we're going to go with the topic at hand definitely makes it a fun experience. Another question that comes to mind when we think about podcasts is, what was one of the first podcasts you've ever listened to? Like, what makes you think to yourself, wow, podcasting is a fascinating format and I would like to get into it because this podcast in particular really makes me enjoy it?
It's funny that you mentioned that. I know the first podcast I've ever listened to or watched had to be one done by Rooster Teeth, and they're kind of a fossil, but for the old heads on YouTube that remember them, they're basically a conglomeration of different channels into one. Their most notable thing of recent memory is doing death battles, and this was before they're even doing that a lot, where they were just a gaming channel with I think his name was Brett and Link were the two guys, and then they just shoot the shit and have their friends on or guests, and they talk about upcoming video games. And me as a little kid, I think I was in middle school, 6th grade, 7th grade, I remember just listening to that, just doing homework and stuff, and really kept me through a day. It was really good, chill and just listen them talking about upcoming games and me just knock out schoolwork. So definitely I'd say Rooster Teeth. I don't even know if they're still doing their podcast, but they were the first ones I listened to. What about you?
My personal experience happened with a little channel called Rebel Taxi. It's a channel that's basically inspired by Toonami-esque aesthetics, and it primarily does cartoon reviews. It was fun to watch that channel, but they were uploading on a bi-weekly basis. And to splice with that bi-weekly basis of uploads was the Pizza Party podcast. And they're the people who actually introduced me to the removal episode. For those who aren't aware, Dexter has an episode where they use excessive amounts of vulgarity. This episode was completely not known by the public at large and almost treated as a myth amongst primarily online heads, chronic illness, I can't be in the sun because I'll turn to ash, individuals or enthusiasts of cartoon and animation. But through a campaign about removal episode, they eventually found it out and was now up there for viewing pleasures on YouTube. They discussed at length about the episode on a podcast, which is how I found out about it, because I didn't directly go out my way to watch the Rebel Taxi podcast because it was about 2 hours in time. But what I found unique about the way that they handled these episodes is the fact that, they would talk about a particular cartoon, but due to their energy and how well they bounce off of one another, they would trail off into non sequiturs and talk about almost anything. And in doing so, it was just really intriguing how they were capable of taking one particular topic and not even ending on that particular topic, but it was such an engaging and charismatic a group of individuals that made it worth listening to. And I always found that facet of that podcast so enamoring.
Nice. And
important.
that's something.
Go
I was gonna wonder and ask you actually, what do you think we could do that gives us different? Because something I've learned is that definitely people doing podcasts, there's tons of them everywhere, especially now more than ever. And I'm thinking, okay, what market are we filling? What niche are we completing? Like, everyone has their thing. What's going to be ours? Because, like I said, from like season 1, I want to try to get guests from all over, but unfortunately, just due to like my social following, I do have a lot more right-wing accounts. So you may see it tend to trend of like more right-wing people on. I still want to get more left-wing people on, and the only issue is like two things. One, I don't know them, or like to verify if like they're actually genuine good people, or two, I don't like they just block me or they don't like me. So I'm just wondering like on that, what we could do different for that. What do you think?
In terms of what I think we exceptionally excel at is kind of just the array of guests we've had on. We've had people who are experts in fossils as well as landlords, people who are in the housing market. That's just really fascinating in of itself. We've had anarchists and also people who just evangelicals of all sorts, but still I think that it's and even in that particular confine, I think there is a niche that is being edged out, because I think in terms of quality of really insightful and intriguing discussions about religiosity and even right-leaning values, I think it's important to have people who can dig into those values and beliefs. It gives them it's not just a stroke off session where both podcasts are just agreeing with each other incessantly. I think for the most part we push even most of our guests to engage with the topic at hand in a way that is more than just, well, do you agree with me, and how intensely do you agree with me? So I think when it comes to our podcast, we definitely do an exceptional job of doing that. And I think that if people, when people do watch our channel, I think one of the things that's very inviting about it is not only the guests, but just how that conversation is steered in that particular manner. Because I don't think there's a lot of podcasters that prioritizes and pushing the guests to be the front and center of whatever particular episode they're doing, rather than the co-host and the hosts themselves are almost an equal level of attention that is shared between the two of them. So if there is anything I can point to that is very unique about the podcast, it's that. And in terms of really getting a collective of unique voices on the podcast. I think we all have our circles, but in terms of like me and filling up time, it's really hard to get. I almost know most of the people I know are just essayists, so they're always like consuming their time with whatever particular topic they're talking about. So it's hard to get them on because they're either kind of socially like fervent as some people are, not as outgoing. But I do believe that I narrowed down a guest that I really want to get on, and potentially within the week or the next week, I think he'll be on soon. And I want to really go out there to strive to get more guests of the ilk that I follow as well, because I think your boy here has definitely a level of charisma. Yeah, the type of charisma that really gets the be patient with me, blue cap individuals to really get. All jokes aside, I think we can really get some very interesting guests on, and I think this year is going to be exceptional in terms of what unique guests we'll be able to see on the podcast.
Yeah, definitely. And for me, I guess the thing I'm personally working on to get better is to speak less, listen more. And in the sense of speaking less, that means I'm not saying anything, but just like the words I'm saying are more important. Like I'm spending less time monologuing because I go back and anytime I listen to an episode, I would write down how many times I've said or what's it or anything like that. And my goal the next episode is to do less of that or consciously think about that. I've been also listening to a lot of like different channels on like public speaking and stuff. And they have been basically God's grace save for me because they cover basically a lot of like tics I have that I didn't even know I was like aware of until I like listen and compare. So I'm trying to do a lot better in that because I ended up like learning that recently, like, hey, when people are just like going on a long tangent, it doesn't really get the audience much. That's why you got to break it up, be like, short, sweet to the punch, if you will. You got any personal things you want to try to work on to get better?
To a certain degree, I think that I can get very fascinated by a particular idea, and that idea is something I might want to venture off into a side quest of sorts to discuss at length about. But sometimes that is misaligned with any particular guest we may be having on. And so, to be really focused, have a focus on whatever we're talking about, make sure that is taking priority above all else. That's probably one of the biggest things I can work on, because conciseness is not hard for me to do. It's simple, but sometimes there is something that perks my ears up and I would like to dive into that topic, and I'm not really concerning myself about the relevance, or how strong the relevance is. That's basically it. But with podcasting out of the way, with that a bit a little move to the side of sorts, in terms of extremely entertaining personalities, who's a podcaster or personality that sticks out to you?
In what regard?
Who is the podcast personality that you enjoy listening to the most?
Well, this is going to sound like a pretty generic episode, but I'm going to have to say Joe Rogan. And the only reason why is because he has such a library of different episodes, such a versatility of guests, that I could like simply skip over the episode I don't like and listen to other ones I'm interested to. Like, I really enjoyed listening to like his series with like Graham Hancock because he's a cool archaeologist dude who's a bit out there in like conspiracy land, but it's just still fun to listen to. And I remember like listening a lot to like him having like Neil deGrasse Tyson on and stuff like that. Those are some pretty good episodes that I found pretty solid. Or like other comedians like Joey Diaz. Like those guys are hilarious. I always loved hearing them. And in a way, I think I've said this before, but I try my best to not replicate JRE, but take what I like from it and implement it into our podcasts. And by the implementation, as in I eventually want to be able to have a guest roster like his where we're getting literally everyone and anyone on from different like views and stuff on anything. 'Cause that's really enjoyable to me. What about you?
When it comes to podcasting, I think it's a very, in terms of just personalities, Not gonna lie. I listened to the PCP podcast, and it's a collection of eclectic personalities of creators that reside within the anime community. DG Bro, who is one time period on there, now known as the Dean. Um, Best Guy Ever. These are some of the members of the PCP podcast. And the reason why these individuals in particular were really fascinating to me because I think the podcast at one point had Monkey Jones on it, but they were all YouTube content creators. And unlike other podcasts where there's a level of humility that typically is espoused by the content creator themselves, there was an innate pride I respected about their way of going about podcasting. Instead of just going,
And said Monkey Jones. I hadn't heard that name in forever. He's like unlocked
yeah.
it for memory. I was like, oof, that guy.
I didn't know you was a fan of Monkey Jones.
I wasn't really a fan, but I was around during that era and I knew of him. And I remember he's like literally disappeared one day. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, he's just gone.
Yeah, I think
Which is unfortunate.
his name is now Simeon Jimmy on YouTube, but he was like on an entire campaign to get his channel back due to YouTube just destroying his channel due to him reading all the Elliot Rogers documentaries and going out of his way to discuss them at length. The funniest thing is that his initial coverage of the whole Elliot Rogers subject matter was that he was very sympathetic to what happened to Elliot Rogers since he was digesting the transpiring events exclusively through the manifesto that was written by Elliot Rodger and other notes he had written. But due to him having a warped perspective on a lot of those subject matters, he excluded a lot of things that would show the social ineptitude of an individual of his caliber. Not being able to even talk to women, social inadequacy to even say hello or approach people. But all of this imagined victimhood is what makes Elliot Rogers such a fascinating character. This notion of wronging by society while actively not engaging with society for the most part is what turned his sympathetic story into one of hilarity and mockery. So if I ever decide
I
to do
feel
it,
kind of bad for the guy, not necessarily for what he did, because he's a piece of shit human for killing other innocent human. And I'm never gonna be like, oh well, people wronged him. Like, no, you don't kill people. It's fucked up. But like, I'll say it like this: I feel bad for him in the same way I feel bad for Dahmer, as in, I don't think they were always like that, and they gradually turned into these like morphed monsters, basically. It's unfortunate, a lot of things that happen, but at the end of the day, that's still not excusable to kill people. Like, no matter how sympathetic or like wrong you feel like someone's been in society, like they've been wronged, I don't think that gives you grounds or merits to be like, well, it's okay or it's excusable that you killed people. Like, I'm not jumping that line, because the moment you do, you open up a large, window for like other people to get thrown there, because it's like, all right, if let's say Elliot Rogers, it's okay for him to kill people, why not, Ted Kaczynski? Why not this person? Why not this person? And it's just like a long laundry list of people. Now you gotta like let it and be like, it's okay to kill, to the point where you no longer have like a moral basis or code whatsoever. It's just like hashtag I kill whoever I want as long as they're on my team, which is, I think, is like very disgusting and repugnant.
yeah, one of the fascinating things about the incels, as we've come to know them, the involuntarily celibate, aka gets no bitches of our
Basically, I just call them get no bitches. That's what they are.
of our population, is that normally there's a self-inflicted victimization that is never really reflective of reality to some degree. And with Elliot Rodger, there was no difference. There was moments where he would go to parties, injure himself trying to do a trick, and a woman who not only comforted him and brought him home to help him out with his injuries was reprimanded for not consoling him through some level of sexual gratification. It's like there's a level of delusion that you just can't yet look and go, oh, The fact that you failed to go on this onslaught is not only hilarious, but it speaks to the social ineptitude of your grander scheme, that cognitive dissonance you have with reality in of itself. So it's very apropos that your massive killing spree was just you shooting some random denizens on the street, because when it comes to the actuality of your events and whatever you made up in your mind, that fairy tale that you ran to is quite, the disconnect is what makes hilarity ensue. In fact, one of the funniest locales that have ever existed upon the internet, who's been discussed at length due to his rapping ability, his constant selling out of record charts and being around the worldwide, is Crypt. If you don't know who that individual is, he's a habitual liar. Someone who stroked it so often that he literally started getting fungi on his penile. As well
Wait,
as
are you talking about right now?
Crypt. His name is spelled or Cyrax. Oh, my apologies, Cyrax. It's spelled CYRA. And
What does this guy do again? Was he like a streamer or something? I'm trying to remember. That name sounds familiar, so I'm asking.
He was a part of the ICP gang, and he was constantly calling himself a rapper while basically stealing beats from other people. One of his greatest accolades was when he there was a shooter and he claimed to be related to him, which he wasn't, but then he tried to sell shirts with him edited in.
So he was just like a provocateur then, like that's what he was?
Not a provocateur, but someone who just had no connection to reality. Even being a deformed creature, a little homunculi, if you ever seen him, his head looks like what happens to a balloon if you hold it at the bottom and just let all the air go up to the top. That's how his head is shaped.
Why does that sound like Ice Poseidon so much? Do you know who that guy is? Ice Poseidon?
Yeah.
All right, so for the audience, so when Twitch was like really popping off, you could do something where you could send money in basically, and it'll read your message out loud. This guy would go into public areas and like scream the message that people send him for like $10, and he'll play it out loud. So there's like videos of him going like crowded areas, and then someone will send a message on his phone and be like, I have a bomb strapped on me. I'm gonna blow up in like 20 seconds. And like a lot of really weird stuff like this. He really wasn't a good human. Like he's a piece of shit scum, if you want me to be honest. But it's one of those things where it's just like, that's why I don't like consumerism culture, because it just promotes these idiots and stuff. Like same for like Nick Avocado. It incentivizes these like people to destroy their lives. It's really disgusting.
That man is a genius. You gotta admit that, alright? You gotta admit that.
What is genius about destroying your life? Like he went from 140 pounds to like near 500.
Yes, but
like
we're talking about like the rules of power, the perception of being weak and being the imbecile, controlling people through the control of retention of time and money and assets. That man is a literal genius. One of the rules of power is to come across as feeble or become the idiot. People often love reality shows for these reasons. The obvious becomes immediate and emerges in their brain to reprimand a bunch of people who will never hear their advice ever within the world, but it's attractive, it's advantageous for them to ridicule these individuals. For people like Nick Avocado, he is the apex of that sort of particular idea. We can speak towards the obvious of your appetite, your dietary habits are causing you an early grave, one that would be nothing but saturated in trans fats. However, to a certain degree, what Nick Avocado does on his channel is clearly a personality. It's clearly a bait of an individual who is insisting that you engage with him in that nature. In fact, I remember the first time I even saw Nick Avocado was during this fasting period of exercising, and not gonna lie, mukbangs hit on some pornography type shit. If you're not trying to eat, if you're not trying to eat, just watch some mukbangs. You can satiate that neurons firing off in that way. But what's interesting here is that the first time I ever was encountering Nick Avocado was one of the spliced together videos in this compilation was just him and his other half discussing whether or not he might have cancer. and he doesn't want to go to the doctors because he doesn't want to know if he has cancer. And so they drop the conversation, and then the rest of the time period, they're just crying, eating noodles. And it's the funniest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. You know, saying that out loud sounds horrible, but you have to.
That's just so fucked up, man. I'm sorry. That's just, I'm like sitting here like, he really just said that. He really just said that. That's the thing I like about you, Hazy. Sometimes I'll be just letting you go off on a podcast. I'm like, wait, did he really just say this? And I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna let it roll. Oh gosh.
Suffice it to say, Big Avocado has made millions of dollars at this.
Okay, but at what cost is what I'm asking you. Like, I don't look. I'll keep it very blunt. Like, I don't care how much money you make. If you sell your soul, it's not worth it. Like, an example, like there's. How do I put this politely? So I'm not going to dox anyone, but at one of my Catholic parishes, there's a guy who shows up later in the day when we do, like, you know, our Bible study and stuff. He's a good dude and everything, but we ended up, like, going back and, like, leaving, and it was late at night, and he's wearing a jacket, and he's taking his jacket off the stretch, and he had Raytheon on his t-shirt. I'm like, oh, you work for Raytheon. And then I'm just sitting here, I was like, you know, I was like, all right, how do you, like, balance that, like, with, you know, being Roman Catholic? And then he's like, I kind of just, like, try to turn a blind eye on it. And I'm like, yeah, but you are aware those are, like, basically the devil incarnate as, like, a corporation, right? Like, they're the Arasaka of, like, you know, this world. They're, like, not good people, and they're notoriously known for, like, funding both sides of conflicts, or just give everyone guns and stuff. So I was like, yeah, like, the guy, for him, for example, tying back into what I was originally saying, he's making a lot of money working for Raytheon. But at what cost? Like, knowing that's blood money, basically. Like, the money you're making is off of, like, people across the world getting blown up and stuff like that. Where, to me, like, there's been situations and positions I've been in where I've been offered a handsome amount of money that I decline or turn down because it's very shady, like, blood money. I'm like, I don't want my hands in this stuff. Like, you know, call me stupid, but I'd rather do an honest day's work than, like, you know, sell my soul like that. And that's unfortunately what Avocado did. He sold his soul, and his body destroyed himself, where his marriage collapsed, his friend groups collapsed, like, no one likes him, he's known as, like, a sociopath, and he just eats himself to death. Like, it's just really disgusting.
Yeah, but have you considered how his bank account is eaten? That's what we do.
Again, I don't care how much money he's making. Like, at what is it worth it? At what cost? Like,
absolutely, I get what you mean. The thing for me is that,
imagine
like,
not being able to walk 1 mile in a park. Just walk. Like, do that very basic action. Like, I don't know. It's just very.
I get that, and it's especially.
Yeah, but he has to wear, like, what, like some Vader mask to go to sleep so he doesn't choke on his own throat, basically. Like, he has to wear, like, an oxygen map. That's disgusting. That's, like, not human.
A Vader mask is crazy. He called it a Vader mask.
That's basically what it is. It's like a giant face mask he has to wear to go to sleep in, because he's so fat. Like, his chest would cave in on him in his sleep, 1, and 2, his lungs could, like, just, and throat could just collapse by how much weight he's under, basically. Like, if you ever want, I'd encourage you to look up pictures of, like, you know, a human skeleton of a morbidly obese person, where you do an x-ray of it, and you see how small the skeleton is in comparison of all, like, the fat and tissue around it. It's just really disgusting to me.
I'm just imagining Nick Avocado going to sleep and all I hear is Star Wars music.
All I hear is like that, like, sound, like the Vader sound.
Yeah, that's all I'm hearing right now. That's all my mind's imagining. But to me, I do think that's a similar principle I have about YouTube and content creation. Like, it's very easy for someone to just re-upload popular content. Like, there are channels that do an absorbent amount of views just uploading Dave Chappelle snippets and, like, comedy bits from other YouTubers. And that can make you easy paying, but I'm like, don't respect. Like, I don't respect that as, like, as content creation or someone who strives to be creative. So I just don't, even though I know how easy it would be to, like, have a channel of that nature and just make easy bank by just being a part of the machine, in a sense. So overall, he definitely is, his soul is definitely in question. You know, his life will ever be a suffrage of, you know, mukbangs and heavy breathing at the end of the day, no matter how much financial gain he gets out of it. And Honestly, I don't know if even if I was playing a character to some degree, I don't know if I could be perceived as this creature in that nature, in that
But that's
regard.
the
I don't
thing I'm
think I
telling
could.
you, Hazy. Like, that's no character. You don't get off camera and take your fat suit off. Like, that's with you 24/7, even off camera. That's what's so disgusting about the whole thing, you know?
No, absolutely. But now I gotta ask you a question. I was looking now. The guy I was telling you about, Cyrex, he's had multiple girlfriends, even though he's built hideously. Like he's built like someone was at a assembly line and was dealing with cardiac cataracts. A little bit of a blindness. Bit of a blind samurai, a bit of a Kinshi from Mortal Kombat X syndrome when he was assembled together. But he has multiple girlfriends, and every time I see someone who's a bit repulsive to most people's standards of what makes someone attractive, but have girlfriends, multiple girlfriends, you gotta start looking at incels and going, it really is just you. It's not everyone else. It really is just whatever you're doing. There's a certain delusion that makes it comfortable to fail. But if this guy has had 5 girlfriends, there's really no excuse. Like I put it in the Requiem Radio chat, and I just want you to gaze upon truly the abyss. I just want you to.
Yeah, let me take a look at this. Put my glasses on. Just. Oh my gosh, is that photoshopped?
No, excuse me. That is a handsome human being.
He looks like Golem from Lord of the Rings. It's like that's disgusting, man.
And if this person
Recently, I've been pondering a theory that, this is a bit controversial, but I've been reading through Plato and a lot of classic philosophy, and they talk about a subject matter of, just simply ugly people tend to have ugly souls. And I thought that's preposterous. Why would anyone say this? And then I look around at, like, the most heinous people in society, and I'm like, yeah, it's starting to make a lot more sense now. Like, Oni-san, or, like, what's this guy's name? Onision, like, EDP 445, like all these guys, they're hideous abominations before the eyes of God. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Like, you're an ugly person, you have an ugly soul. And you sending me this person's picture, who again looks like a golem.
Doing you really
yeah,
big. That's not doing
my theory is now being like further solidified.
At the beginning of Notre, I'm getting a little bit of feedback, but you remember the beginning of Notre Dame, where the man finds the baby of Notre Dame, and he is so repulsed by it. He's so shocked by it that like he contemplates throwing it. Contemplates throwing the child in the well. He's like, "Oh my god, hey, you are not meant for this." That's an insane thing to have occurred. But
Hey, what's up?
in terms of I can't imagine what his baby pictures look like. It would probably be a very startling situation. But again, if this person can get a girlfriend, I feel like doomerism is really what's controlling and consuming these individuals. Even if you were involuntarily celibate, I mean,
Oh,
sex
you want
work-
to talk about the issue of incels? Yeah. My 2 cents on incels are: 1, they're a bunch of bitches and they're weak, and 2, a lot of them have horrible hygiene, just don't take care of themselves. And what irritates me about incels is that they say like, oh, no women want me. When they say that, they're meaning like no 11 out of 10 like supermodels want me. I hate to break it to these people, but these women don't want majority of people either. Like, it's like, I'm sorry, but like a majority of people are going to go through their life and not marry an 11 out of 10 supermodel husband or wife. That's just reality. Like, a lot of people don't look that good. Hence why they're called supermodels for a reason, as in not a lot of people look like them. And I'm like, dude, if you like, I don't know. So if I could talk to an incel right now, I'd tell him this. Like, first, set up a routine schedule, fix your hygiene, like actually bathe, shower daily, brush your teeth, mouthwash, all that stuff like that. Groom yourself, like trim your beard up, clean it. If you could grow a beard. I'm not talking about like patchy little shit. If it's like patchy, just shave, clean shave. Go to a gym, focus on yourself, drink a gallon of water a day, and the stuff will fall in place naturally. Like, women are more likely to be attracted to a guy who actually has like hobbies or like friend groups than a dude who's like chronically online, like raging against women and stuff like that. It's just the weirdest thing. Like, you'll get like yourself, like, like let's say a 6 or a 7 like woman just by doing those things. Like, having basic routine hygiene or like standards for yourself. But I don't know. That's just my take. A lot of these guys are like horrible talking to women too. They're like, oh, I held the door open. Why didn't she like perform oral on me? I'm like, bro, what? Like you're literally a porn addict. Your brain is fried. What are you talking about? It's like it's not how these things work.
Absolutely. I think things you hit on the head of is that most of these people aren't actually missing out on women. Most of the time period, the ideal woman is who they want. And since they can't get that individual, they make it seem like this global phenomenon in which women are depriving them of any partner. It's like, no, it really isn't the case. And often enough, even these sad stories that people start telling you, they're like, didn't you know I was denied and rejected by 1,000 women? Like, at some point you gotta ask yourself, is it just you, bro? Is there something wrong with what you're doing? Like,
yeah, when they say that, here's what they mean by rejection. They walk up to a random ass woman they don't even know. They're like, hey, you want to go out with me? They're like, I don't know you. And they're like, okay, bye. And they just walk away. And like, look, you see, I just got rejected. I'm like, bro, what was that? You just randomly walked up to her. It was like, hey, you want to go out? And you left. It's like weird.
It's low-key the anime version of those hikikomori otakus, those who are infatuated with hobbies of any sorts but have ineptitude when it comes to social skills. Those individuals who they show in those animes saying, hey, Nachan, will you be my lover? Like, no? Okay. And then later on in the show, he's like, she rejected me. She scorned me. Like, bro, she didn't know you. What are you talking about? She didn't even know you. But one of the things that made me so elated was recently watching this documentary called Love Shies. And I had to ask you, Sola, do you know what a love shy is? Are you aware of this terminology?
Let me ask you this question instead. Do I want to know what a love shy is?
No.
Okay. It's like this meme, like, this does not sound good.
So the way you asked it is like, it sounds like something that makes my brain melt, but all right. Love shies are similar to incels, but suffice it to say, they're looking for love, but they just can't find it. So they often go to these experts and gurus that are helping them out. And some of the people there, when they speak, it's so fascinating because they're under the impression that they're just unlucky. But then when you listen to them discuss anything for any long period of time, there's a level of delusion where you gotta say, if you were to sit across from them, like, do you sincerely think it's women who are the problems here? One person, unironically, was like, obviously, women, like, this is one of the coaches, mind you, for these love shies. And he's like, remember, men, women don't actually like sex. What they do love to do is impress men. And so, through this processes of evaluating who are the chads and alphas in the room, they want to satisfy that person in particular. Why do you think you hear no woman ever emphatically speak about sex in the dating market? And listen to that person talk is like, this is your guru. This is not only your guru, but this is the person who's going to lead you guys out of celibacy. Well, good.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff, there's a reason I don't even get into these community things, because I feel like a lot of this is brain rot. Like, I don't want to get involved in communities or deal with people who I find, like, retarded, because I'm not getting on their level. It's like, the same thing goes for, like, Groypers, a bit of a topic change, but I'm on the right, and it gets annoying butting heads of these idiots 24/7, and it's to the point I don't even engage them. I just, like, simply kick them out or block them or anything like that, because at the end of the day, like, they're retarded, and someone's like, oh, Solo, why don't you debate Groyper Bro 1488? I'm like, dude, I'm not wasting my time on that shit. That's like equivalent to asking me, like, hey, Solo, why don't you jump into Muddy Pigpen and go wrestle that pig? I'm like, why? Like, I don't need to do this thing. I don't owe anyone conversation at the end of the day. That's a shocker people need to learn on social media. Hey, for everyone listening, guess what? You don't owe anyone a debate or, like, commentary. If someone says, like, debate me, bro, you don't have to debate them. You don't even have to respond to them. You can simply block and move on about your day. Trust me, that's a little secret tip that could save you a lot of stress and time. But that's just how I go about it.
Especially sometimes people like, in the marketplace of ideas, you really need to give these people the time and day to figure out this stuff, and being that person who engages with these people will help some people, see the light, help them ensure that, they realize what they're doing is wrong. But sometimes you listen to people talk like, bro, if this was what convinced you, like, I don't know what I'm going to say to you that's gonna be the light for you at some point. Sometimes I gotta let you get out of the mud yourself to some degree, like, especially if it's somebody who's like, what they're telling you isn't even like a conversation or an actual argument, but it's just a story they're telling you. Nothing has any basis or premise in reality. It's just a narrative that the willing out to you. I wanted to show you one of the people in this story about love shies. One of the individuals that constantly berated the other people for having delusional ideas of love and being completely disconnected from reality was a guy who was wearing the hat. He's the guy who's like, oh, all these guys are never going to get laid, but my feet are on the ground. I'm grounded in my beliefs of sex, loves, and relationships. And I want you to just get a look at this guy's fit. Check out the drip check out real quick. Check this out, my guy.
Oh my gosh, what is he wearing? Easy, why are you showing me these people, man?
I went down a rabbit hole, and I just have to let everyone know. I feel like the British are coming. I have to let everyone know. I have to inform this. So when he's talking and he looks like the Quaker Oats man, I'm like, yeah, that's your this is your ideal fit. This is what you're attracting. This is what magnanimously gets all the females. This is your willing fit you're wearing. You look like about to pollen the Mayflower. What are you?
Yeah, and for the audience listening in, one of these incel guys, he's wearing some George Washington looking ass hat, basically some Revolutionary War stuff. It's just, gosh, I feel bad for these guys.
I do too. I really do. My heart, I'm a bleeding soul, a compassionate an empath, one might say. Usually, if anyone ever says it to you, run for the hills. The sociopath, they're unironically about to sell you on some type of pyramid scheme, a Ponzi scheme, or just be abusive significant other. But seriously, I love this so much because it speaks to like this innate level of delusion that they're not aware of. And even, have you seen some of the accounts where it's just an incel account? I'm like, that's just doing posts about like women and all that. I'm like,
brother, like I said, I don't engage with these people. I have better things to do with my time. Like, I just block them and move on. Like, I'm not even engaging with stupidity. That's my rule. Like, the only people I enjoy engaging with is like people who are like intellectually stimulating. Like, there's nothing intellectually stimulating about like incels or idiots like these, you know?
Oh, all right. So, last but not least, the last picture I wanted to share with you was
boy.
a guy who considered himself a Chad amongst all the incels. He's like, I think we should take their material. All these incels who like D&D and playing these games online and not looking for real women to like spend the night with. I think what we should do is, as the men in this situation, we need to give them a wake-up call. All right, like, oh, okay, cool. You see, so I've created a comic book devoted to showing you all the scenarios in which these people will never have the sexual gratification that they so desire. So that's why they find themselves constantly looking for some level of escapism. So what I found hilarious about that is that he made a comic, and he even voiced at the comic in the documentary. He does a bunch of voices, men and women. He's very inclusive.
Let me see what you got.
I should show you real quick. Let me just see if I can upload it real quick for you. Give me 1 second, because have you seen? Have you? Are you a connoisseur of documentaries? And I know you're a big fan of documentaries.
Yeah, decently bit. What you got for me?
Documentary I'm referring to about the love shies it should be on your top list of like documentaries to watch.
Alright, I'll tell you this though. I got my arm pulled and hustled to watch this documentary about some guy called like Boogie 2988. That was like the most depressing, disgusting shit I've ever seen. And oh my gosh.
Here it is. The image I'm going to show you. It's called "Welcome to the Blood to Thud." Mind you, the person who drew this, I think he's like 28. This is his reenactment of guys having sex with the woman that these guys desire. He created a comic based around the losers.
It looks like a schizo just made that. Oh gosh.
I just love it. I love it so much. He's like, he wants to find all the incels and force them to watch like other guys have sex with all the women they can. And I'm just like,
yeah, it's at the point where I'm like, I'm good, Chief. I'm just good. Like, I don't need this retarded shit in my life. Have you actually seen the Boogie documentary?
The Boogie documentary, I've watched the entire Boogie documentary. And the funny thing about Boogie is that I've known about him for quite some time. Early on in like the whole Anita Sarkeesian hate bandwagon, he was on stage with her and everyone was exceptionally sympathetic to Boogie. He was like the Mr. Rogers of YouTube, as he was often described as. But then something started to emerge within Boogie, this inconsistency of who he actually was versus the fence sitter that he attempted to be. Mostly, I believe that this fence-sitting position can never be maintained due to his enormous weight that he could never get down for any consistent period of time. Wow, that felt considerably mean. What I meant to say was, the thing that makes Boogie kind of interesting is that he desperately wanted to be this likable character, but it just could never stay long enough. And even dumb stuff he would say on stream. Do you remember this iconic statement he made to one of his donors who happened to be African American? He donated, I think, $25. And Boogie's just like, wow, that's a lot of money for your type of people. Or maybe, I don't know, I guess. That's like,
yeah, like for the record too, again. Yeah, I know. For people listening in, there's a documentary on YouTube, like this YouTuber who I wasn't as familiar with him, but it's from like the early 2000s era, early 2010s, and he kind of just nosedived really hard in a lot of things he did, and had a lot of stuff against him. And it's one of those things where like you get a good person, you wonder like, okay, were you a good person who just turned like shitty, or were you always a shitty person? You know what I mean?
Yeah, Boogie298 was one of the first YouTubers to ever grow in prominence and become a popular figure within YouTube, playing the character Francis, who was basically the every person archetype that you thought of when you think of a nerd caricature. He grew popular of doing that, and then eventually ventured off into gaming and social and political commentary. His downfall came to this incongruency of those two characters, and the fact that Boogie, for the most part, is a perpetual liar and suffers from doomerism. Wow, look at that. A unifying idea that keeps emerging. Incels had doomerism, Boogie has doomerism, and we both talked about documentaries. That's called a narrative threat, folks. But all jokes aside, the thing that's funny about Boogie is that there's this level of self-pity that I couldn't be related to in any capacity. Not socially, not genetically, not even in like proximity. I couldn't imagine being around this person for more than a week if they spoke about themselves incessantly like that.
Yeah, like this guy's like very nihilistic and just like spiteful and angry at the world. And just, it's almost like Eeyore from like Winnie and Pooh, where it's just like that draining negative energy. It just drags everything down. It's like, dude, like, come on.
Yeah. And the funny thing about Boogie is that he did have a blossoming and booming YouTube channel, but he just never stayed consistent. And after a while,
I don't even think it was that. Wasn't there some like dude who like mass compiled a bunch of clips of him saying like random like things and got him canceled basically and just destroyed him? And then he kind of just lashed out after that and became an asshole.
His actually, you're absolutely right. I'm mischaracterizing that. The Boogie 298 documentary, the first one that ever got any sort of like massive amount of traction, was done by this person, I think named Ben something, but it was an exceptional video. His video on Boogie was really, really good actually. Um, he took a lot of the things and subject matters and inconsistencies brought about by the subreddit that showed a lot of issues with what Boogie was saying, and showed how the incongruency between his character and who he was becoming more apparent to the populace at large. And so his attempt to like basically get back at that individual was to talk about doxing, to talk about basically attempt to play the victim, and it just didn't go well for him, especially when you dwell within a community that is based around criticizing others. People start to hyper focus on your actions and to see whether or not there's a validity to any of it. So eventually, a lot of his downfall was a self-inflicted one to some regard. Actually, here it is. Christopher Tom, he was the one person who showed an exceptional level of issues with Boogie. His weight loss, his Twitter reactions, his insistence on interacting with his haters, as some people might put it. But yeah, Boogie is really bad at handling the idea, the problem, as I pointed out before, the incongruency of trying to be PC while being also an edgy guy just ends up with you appealing to nobody as well. That was also a big problem with Boogie, that he wanted to portray himself as like this nice guy, but it just simply wasn't that person. And even in the documentary, one of the things that becomes very apparent is that Boogie could do better, and he could probably get his stuff together, but he doesn't want to get out of his comfortability. Because I believe that to some degree, sometimes negativity can be infatuating in of itself. You know what I mean, Sola? That some people can be infatuated with negativity, that it's a comforting place to be at. If everything's out of your control, if the universe just is denoting that you are the one who has to go through all the suffrage, it is merely something that is happening to you rather than something you have any control of. And while it can be bad, it still is a far more comfortable idea than acknowledging your agency in that matter. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And that's an unfortunate thing. And this goes back to like a common theme we've been talking about. Like, I'm sorry, but like, I don't see any good coming out of a lot of like influencers. Like, influencers to me are the actors of the Shakespearean era, in a sense that it's like very fake. It's very unreal, and just like mask upon mask upon mask, or just, I don't know, it's, you get the worst type of people to be incentivized to do horrible things, or you get like good people who get broken down and do bad things. And I'm not trying to sound black-pilled too much, but I can't think of by memory like people who've been in the, you know, influencer business for a long time that's come out unscathed. Like, the only guy I could think of is probably PewDiePie, but even him, he went through his own bullshit, but he left. He's like, nah, I care more about my wife and my newborn kid than arguing with people online whether or not, you know, I'm a racist or not. He's like, I don't owe people these conversations. You know, I'm just gonna be with my family.
And I think
like,
that's important to understand. Yeah, that what deserves your time is absolutely something you need to be very mindful of as a social media personality, in the strongest quotation marks you can put forth, and as a content creator who is interested in delving into the social media landscape. The problem with Boogie is that not only was he somebody who had failures, but he just started going down this spiral. Like, if you look at the Boogie 298 documentary, he constantly talks about his expenses as though they need to be what they are, but they don't. He could downsize. He could stop.
Yeah, he talks about, didn't he talk about wanting to buy like 3 or 4 brand new video games and they're all like $70? And I'm like, dude, you're talking about you're about to go bankrupt and you're concerned about buying video games? Like, come on.
Yeah, and he put that under the I had to buy these things. He slaps all of his, like, his electricity, his food for the week, and his medication under all the I have to get these things, and he's slipping in like really, really innocuous purchases that he does not need under the have to do something. Like even with his job interview, he's like, oh, there's rumors going around about me. I have diabetes, I can't really walk. I got a bow-legged walk on me. And I love that moment in the interview because there's this piercing look that comes over the person who's taking Boogie as an applicant and going, do you want to help yourself out, or you just are actively sabotaging yourself? Because I can't help a person who wants to do that. Like I can see this self-sabotaging nature you're engaging in this very moment, and there's nothing they can do with a person of that ilk.
Yeah, it's just frustrating, man. And like, I pray for a lot of these people, and man, it's just
like that? Why you sounded so winded? You sounded
it's just like sometimes I'm just thinking back because like documentary just made me feel sad, like where I'm like just how pathetic he was as a human. Like I think about guys like him or Nick Ocado or like any of these influencers who like lives are just destroyed by like being, I'd say it almost like Icarus flying too close to the sun, if you will, like getting too much in it at once, and that's what really frustrates me.
And the worst thing is that like he straight up just shows himself like, yeah, this woman who came into my life who's made everything better ever since my divorce. Yeah, she's
I was an 18-year-old girl, and like the first thing she says, like, yeah, I never had a father in my life. I'm like, oh, yep, there it is. 18 years old, marrying this creep. He's like, I never had a dad or a father figure. I'm like, yep, that explains it.
Solo was detecting had his fatherless behavior barometer going off. He's like, and there it is. It explains every following up action, and even then, it's like, oh, this woman is very socially inept and doesn't really have like a solid basis. And the worst thing for me during that documentary is that he's just talking about how he might not be alive in like 5 or 10 years. I'm like, you can do things right now that can stop that from being the case. But I think the creator of the documentary perfectly articulated Boogie's issue. He talks about himself like he's already dead. Like he's like you're talking to like poltergeist. Like he's not there.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and it's almost like wishing himself a slow death. Like
Exactly.
that's what he's doing. He's just slowly killing himself instead of just outright doing it, and it's just really crappy thing.
Yeah, not really the Chad move. Not already just just going through with it. And I can't imagine the mortician trying to get him out of his house, just moving like a very expensive whoopee cushion at the end of or beanbag chair. I think the rolling method would probably be the best way to handle it if they are trying to get him onto some sort of platform to elevate him and roll him out of there. Not rolling him out of there like as in like rolling his body out of there, even though I think he's a bit rotund. But yeah, that was the Boogie 298 documentary. And it's bad when the person who's the creator of the documentary said, I had to like take a break. Like I couldn't be around. That's the worst part about it. The guy who was creating the documentary was like, I can't do this. I need to take a break. I can't be around you as a part of the documentary.
Yeah, and it's like you don't blame him either. Like, how long do you think you'd be able to sit there and record that guy?
No, just no.
But what was I going to think of? Besides that, what else is new? What have you been up to? You got any plans or anything you want to do?
Currently, I've been making a big doc of January 6th. I thought it would be worthwhile to like really, really, really just lay out an entire sequence of events. And what I find to be the most hilarious thing about almost everything that had to do with voter fraud is concluding the video with the electors. And for those who are aware about the electors, you will probably understand why that's like a big punch in the gut for those who are adamant about voter fraud to like have the entire video conclude with electors and how those electors were unofficial, but they were propped up by Donald Trump's legal team to pretend and portray themselves as though they were being officiated by Congress when they weren't. So, kind of sounds like Kind of sounds like a little bit of a, you know, it sounds a little bit like some funny business, But
Oh, no.
but beyond that, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, what's up, man?
If I was getting doxxed, what would be the best course of action? I mean, in terms of the advice you would give me.
If you were getting doxxed,
Yes, if I was getting doxxed, what would your advice be to me?
first advice would be know who's doxing you in the sense of like, are they people who are trying to tear you down? Two, know if they have any dirt on you. As in, even if you didn't do anything wrong, do they have like a clip of you out of context? Three would be go through your social media platforms and try to delete old stuff that's like, a bit spicy that you feel like they could be taken out of context. Just general stuff like that to cover yourself. And four, just own it is what I'd say maybe. Like, it's like whatever type thing.
No, I'm saying like, let's say they're doxing my like home location. What would be your the best way to engage with that if someone's like doxing you in that manner?
Well, let me see. Isn't that like in a way illegal? Because I remember, what's her name? Like this like TikToker did that to someone who was like posting videos about her. She like showed up to his fucking house and like live stream recorded his house and her like outside of it. Like,
No
isn't there like
fucking way. That's a bit of fucking hinge. Holy shit, I've never heard that one.
no? It's like there was some really really big Twitch streamer. That was like a gamer one. And then there was a guy who was kind of like a leech, where anytime she posted a video,
Oh
he'll
shit,
post
Jack
a counter
Sniper,
video.
Sniper Wolf. Yeah, you're talking about
Yeah,
Jack
Sniper Wolf, thank you.
Yeah.
Like, she literally showed up to his house recording live stream, like, hey, this is where he lives. Should we talk it out? I'm like, you literally just doxed the guy's like address, basically. Like, I knew she got a fine for that or something, but I don't know.
That was funny to me because I'm just like, how do you get to this point where you post it online, think no one else is going to look at you as seriously unhinged, being an exceptionally successful YouTuber with I think 10 million subscribers as it currently stands right now. I don't know how you do that and think, and being on the internet as long as you have, think that everyone's going to look at you as the most like, yeah, this is the sensible action. This was the best course of action for what you did. But for most people, when someone's being doxxed, at least I tend to lean towards this type of advice. Most of the time, don't confirm, if you can help it, don't confirm that they've doxed you. Especially if they're anonymous, at best.
Keep it as down low as possible.
Yeah. All you're doing by announcing you have in fact been doxxed is confirming that you have the right information. If I ever get doxxed, I'm never informing the public at large that you did a good job. Like, yeah, you got me. Like, no, you're not gonna hear from me. If you dox me, even if you did, I'm never going to give you the gratification or confirmation that you've actually succeeded in your job, because people who do that for those reasons are trying to cause you harm, and to provide them the gratification, the confirmation that they've achieved their goal makes no sense to me. But the whole Sniper Wolf situation, that was like a global conversation and discourse, to the point where like it made sense naturally that most people probably knew what Jack's Films was, so they probably always like, whoa dude, what the hell, she's outside your house. But due to her being such a popular personality and figure, no actual recourse was going to happen. At best, she got a slap on the wrist and lost demonetization, I believe, for a month, and paid lip service to the public at large about how her actions being wrong, after I think 2 days straight of mocking the notion of there being actually any danger occurring. So, but the reason why I asked this question is, if I had given the advice I just told you, never confirm that they dox you, and to elevate it will only embolden those people to continuously harass you. Like if somebody had given that advice, for example, what would you say to someone responding with, they're telling me to shut the fuck up and be quiet about harassment and bigotry?
I mean, if you want me to be honest, I just ignore them. Like, I'm not trying to sound like a bigger person here. Like, it depends like how far it goes. And if you feel like it's going too far, then like get legal help in that. Like, I
Yeah,
think
but
I've
you
said this
wouldn't
before,
elevate
but on
the
Twitter, I had someone try to call like the CIA or FBI on me.
See, guy.
No, and then that was because I was hosting debates on geopolitics, Russia-Ukraine stuff, and he literally wanted to get me fired from my job. And I was like, checked where I was. I'm like, all right, am I doing anything legally wrong? Nope. Like, I just like I was going through all this stuff. Like, okay, yeah, I'm good. I'm not gonna like get in trouble for anything. So I just ignored him. Like, whatever. Like, they can't fire me over something I haven't done wrong. Like, sorry, not sorry. It's not how it's not how the work.
The CIA is absolutely insane. It really speaks to how
It's not the first time. Funny enough, CIA showed up to my uncle's or great uncle's house once because I think I told you before our family came over from Cuba in like the early 70s, and he is very much into like flying drones and tech stuff, and he owns like a small farm in like Florida area. I'm not gonna say location, but the CIA literally pulled up in his house in like black vans and shit and pulled guns on him, and he's like, yo, what the fuck's going on? And then they're like, oh yeah, wrong person, sorry, we got the completely full name wrong. There's actually a guy from Cuba though with your full name as well who is an active terrorist. So that was really weird and uncomfortable, but yeah. Let me think what else. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, keep it on the down low or as private as possible. Like, don't tweet things like, "Oh my gosh, I've been doxxed" or anything crazy like that.
yeah, don't never do that actually. But
Same as like internet arguments. You never admit when you're wrong. You just never do because you're gonna get dogpiled.
yeah. But to me,
I have yet to see like example like a YouTube apology gone right. It's always been them get slammed immediately after like you're a horrible person.
To some degree, there's been some apologies that have been alright, but
Really,
usually,
I can't think of one. I can't think of a single one that went good for the person.
I mean, there's always going to be those people who are like looking for blood per se, like they're just attempt. Well, I think I was going to say the James Charles one went pretty well, but that was after he debunked the majority of the claims and what people were claiming about him. If it's not touching kids, I'm pretty sure apologies go pretty well.
I mean, I only think the only apology I could think of. What was that guy's name? He's a furry now, Pyrocynical or something like that. Him?
Yeah.
Where like they ended up exposing the kid just flat out lied to a lot of things he was saying. And then he had to like basically own up and admit that he was a furry into like some weird shit. He's like, look guys, I'm a degenerate. I'm into like some weirdly weird things, but I'm not a pedophile. Like, that wasn't helping his case. It's still disgusting. I still look at him as a disgusting human being, and like,
that shit was weird.
Yeah, I know. And I'm like, okay, like, sure, he's not a pedophile, but like, what did you win from this? Everyone knows like all of your like deepest, darkest, weirdest, like degenerate sins, basically. And I'm like, that's kind of gross.
Listen, especially, I think the thing that made it mostly concerning for a lot of people is that he didn't verify the ages of a lot of people he talked to, especially doing a bit of a making Keemstar look kind of crazy. We're talking to the French girl when she did in fact exist, and he made an entire video that got millions of views, basically clowning on Keemstar. Because granted, Keemstar didn't have evidence, but Keemstar didn't make that woman up. She did exist, and he was talking to her, so that's kind of fascinating. And it's sad because I think he's an exceptional content creator. Like, he's genuinely entertaining to watch, but I kind of steered away from his content after all that happened. But yeah, the reason why I brought all this up is because Hassan, your favorite content creator, I think he gave birth to a lot of your political leanings as they stand today.
He get hit by a bus. I don't know what you're talking about.
He basically is in beef with Keffels, extremely
wow, two horrible humans get like beefing. That's crazy. They could get hit by a bus, both of them. I hope they both play in traffic, if you want me to be honest. Like straight on the highway interstate. Like,
this man champion Mean Girls right now. He's like, I don't
like I'm like, I don't know. I feel like I'm getting weird. Like, the older I get, the less I like any of these influencers or streamers and things. Like, I just don't like, I think they're fake. I think like all of them left and right are fake. Like Steven Crowder's fake, Ben Shapiro fake. All these guys are fake. Like leftists are fake too. Like everyone's fake. I'm like, I'm just going to the corner and read books now. I'll see you guys later.
I can definitely get the cynicism to some degree. For me, most I don't like some of the probably conservative like politicians when they're like got American flags in the background. Like, I know you're Canadian. I don't know. I really have a genuine dislike of those type of people. I don't know why you're pretending like you live here. You don't. But the thing that made it kind of hilarious to me was that Hassan basically told Keffels during the time period she was talking about Kiwi Farms, in quotation marks, doxing her. She basically elevated the story to the point where everyone knew about her getting doxed, and Hassan gave a completely sensible take to the point where I couldn't say anything other than, yeah, he's right. You shouldn't elevate it because you're emboldening people who are using anonymity to dox you and just want to cause you harm. But Keffels argued and accused him of basically ignoring the bigotry behind the motivations of these transphobes, and like so the whole really neurodivergent extravaganza had occurred as a byproduct of all that. But it was one of the few moments I couldn't help but just say, wow, Hassan's giving some really sensible takes, and Keffels is really attempting to heighten it to a point where it doesn't make any sense. Especially due to the fact that this person like basically made the career off of being a habitual liar to me. They took credit for getting Lauren Southern banned. They took credit for getting Destiny banned off of Twitch. And then when they started to get some flack for this, they started claiming like, oh, well, no, I lied. I claimed I did that, but I didn't. And it feels as though now they're getting into more alternative left-wing areas because, well, they've basically been abandoned by the leftist purists of the community, you know, the ones who are constantly trying to take down people. And her whole campaign against Kiwi Farms felt like a failure completely, because not only did they not cause the deaths of a lot of the trans people they were calling for, but a lot of the unfortunate things about some of the notes left behind by some of those trans individuals is that they explicitly state why they were going to take their own lives, and it wasn't because Kiwi Farms was never mentioned. So, you know, there was some exploitation by Keffels, which is why even if she attempts to redeem herself in some of the communities, I just find her repulsive as a person in terms of her messaging to people.
No, definitely.
So,
Hey, what was I gonna say to you earlier? I was trying to remember.
Okay. My apologies that I cut you off.
No, I'm just trying to remember what I was gonna say to you. Oh yeah, you're talking about like January 6th stuff.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think? Like, your general take on all of that was? Think it's pretty stupid.
January 6th is, I believe, the litmus test for whether or not you're operating in reality. And I know that might sound harsh to some individuals, but most of the time period, what that causes this weird dichotomy of, well, Trump couldn't trust any of his elected officials or any of the judges who were appointed by him to make evaluations about the evidence of voter fraud. And he couldn't trust all of his secret services, his inner cabinet that were informing him that there was no voter fraud, because he genuinely believed that there was voter fraud. And if he had to basically go through multiple lawyers to hire the people that were basically going to tell him what he wanted to hear about the election being stolen, you know, there's nothing wrong with that, because that's his inimmutable right. Even though the current trial that Donald Trump is on doesn't say anything about that. It even says he has the exercisable right to even claim that the election was stolen. The problem is that his current accusations are, the current trial that Donald Trump is on is that Donald Trump had a sensible degree of knowledge and information to not come to the conclusion that the election was stolen from him through voter fraud, through multiple channels of information he had at the time period, and try to use novel, as in perverse methods, to ensure that he would become the next president through state electors who were not certified by Congress, to basically asking votes for the states, and basically create a form of voter fraud in and of itself. So the problem about that, oh, by the way, that whole dichotomy thing I brought up earlier, is that they'll say something like, oh, but Hillary Clinton's emails clearly had some level of documentation that would clearly have incriminated her, and the only reason why they didn't is because they're on the side of Hillary Clinton and they want to basically shield her from criticisms. Or they'll bring up how Biden had documents within his garage, and once, even though Biden found out they were there, he gave them back. But they'll call this dichotomy and say, like, obviously this was crooked behavior, but Donald Trump gets this exceptional level of the benefit of the doubt. And this is where, for me, the selective skepticism really starts to make how evident a lot of the political motivations are when it comes to January 6th, and where they stand, and why I think it's a coup, and why I think Donald Trump serves as a blight on our history as Americans in the democratic processes. So that's my whole thought process on that. I have a strong disdain for the individual.
Yeah, no, I agree. I thought it was like a pretty stupid situation, and they broke Julius Caesar's main rule too, which I thought was pretty dumb. Is that Julius Caesar says only break the law if you are ensure absolute power. In all other circumstance, you observe it. So, like, I think it was dumb just have a crowd of like boomers walk into places, fling around flags, and just walk out. I'm like, okay, that was just the whole situation is a shit show.
Yeah, you know it's kind of bullshit when you have people like Rudy Giuliani, who's like the white horse or whatever the fuck they were calling him in public, the vanguard of Donald Trump.
That guy before, funny enough, Rudy Giuliani. He seems really out of it when I spoke to him.
Yeah, that greasy bitch. Rudy Giuliani literally went to court cases saying, oh, there's voter fraud, the public, there's voter fraud, there's absolutely voter fraud. But when he gets in front of the court hearings and when he's placed under oath, he said, oh, we're not alleging voter fraud. I'm like, you spineless. Like, if there's ever an evident moment of knowing that you're full of shit, is something like this. When that occurs, when you go, well, we're not alleging voter fraud, but like, okay, all right, okay. Okay. That's why you're getting disbarred. This is exactly why you deserve to get disbarred.
Yeah, no, Rudy Giuliani, he's an interesting character because it's weird because I got my grandfather from New York said like in his early days he was good at cleaning up the scum from the streets, like all the gangs and stuff like that. But he kind of just became like, Trump's top guy. Like the moment Trump became president, just went downhill ever since. But I'm not a New Yorker, so my hat's not in the ring on that. So I just hear like, some people say he used to be really good as like a mayor and then just everything else went downhill. But I don't know.
Yeah, I get that because a lot of people say like, oh, Rudy is like is doing his thing, but this is the thing that also like people will not like engage with. It's like, okay, like people keep saying these like, oh, none of these cases went to trial, but they were dismissed on evidentiary basis, which means that the evidence was so inadequate that there was nothing to do with it. It's like, but people want these claims to be exhaustively what people desire. These positions people take up is exhaustively unconvinced. Like, there's no amount of evidence you could provide to them that could prove them wrong about voter fraud. Like, no matter how many trials they show you, how many video footages they show you that have had updates to them that they can look towards, they will never do so. And the funny thing about almost all this is that Donald Trump was paying Rudy an absorbent amount of money.
Yeah, the whole situation, if you want me to be honest, even as a right-winger, I still thought it was like right-wing cope, where it's just like, look, he lost. Sorry, it is what it is. Just move on. Well, it's unfortunate, but it is what it is.
Now, I gotta ask you a question. Do you think someone who was a fascinating question that I've been kind of mulling over for quite some time is the following? Do you think someone who is continuously claiming foul play upon elections should be able to participate in said election? Do you think that it creates a further zone of distrust and potentially an irreparable damage to the the democratic process.
No, I feel no issue with those guys running. Like, I hate to say this to a lot of people who aren't really educated on, like, American presidents or histories, but we've had a lot of crazy presidents who've done a lot of more crazier things. Like, Andrew Jackson, for example, he was known for, if you went against him in the opposite party, he'll get up, make conference until you get outside, I'm going to duel you and kill you. And he has a record of, like, 43 people, because back then dueling was legal, where he just simply kill you. And if we're going to compare that to today, where Trump just goes online and, like, spews out a bunch of, voter fraud stuff, it's like night and day. And that's how I see it, like that, where I'm like, all right, what presidents did we have before do crazy things? How is that compared to now? Like, there's been a lot of presidents who've done a lot worse, so it doesn't really bother me. I say let it go, for the people. They want to vote for him, go ahead. Like, it doesn't really phase me either way. I'm personally not going to vote for him. I don't think I'm going to vote in this election. I may just vote, like, as a meme, like, probably third party or something like that, or I may vote for someone else. But like I said earlier at the beginning of the conversation, democracy to me is asking the question, do you vote for Ball or do you vote for Moloch? Where I'm not getting anywhere with this. They're both evil to me. Like, neither of them bring a substantial good or care about people type thing. So what are you saying?
I can see how sometimes politics can really make someone feel disenfranchised, especially if the particulars about what they were voting for don't get passed within the time frame. But I often look towards, like, me, it's usually like the barrier of what was not expected, like forgiveness for like debts, the insurance of Pfizer Moderna to be given to an unprecedented amount of people to ensure the health of the populace at large. Current withdrawals from other countries, our support of current conflicts, and how we are perceived by NATO as a collective to ensure that, like, the borders of particular countries are respected. These are some of the things that, like, I look towards, and even if, like, the main thing I may have voted for to ensure occurs within the presidency of the 4 years, I often look towards those sort of things. And even when we talk about Trump and the worst things he's done, like, I get the idea of, like, killing 40 people. That's extreme. But I'm often looking towards, like, the average voter and the populace that was led astray. Currently, as it stands right now, there were 378 individuals that had been sentenced to a period of incarceration involving January 6th, 2021, and the uprising in the Capitol, where people were getting quite, like, long sentences. And even then, I think around 80 of their cases gave them leniency in terms of how they could have charged them, despite the fact they could have exercised the maximum charges of insurrection. There was leniency given to a lot of people. But a lot of the people who have been documented during the trials had pointed to their actions being influenced by Trump, someone who had 50 million people following him during a time period where he still had a platform on social media platforms like Twitter. So the irreparable the irreparable damage and the permanent change he caused to the populace at large, especially the perception of how voting even occurs within the country. I can understand that some policies may not occur the way or ideally as one might like, but
but hey, what I'm saying is that it's not even policy related either. It's just like, I would say all the way back to JFK, probably every single president after hasn't really done anything that's of, like, major significance, in a sense where a lot of them. So it goes back to my issue of democracy, where it's incentivizing candidates to run and embellish themselves with very large promises and deals. And the moment they get in office, they do nothing. It's just like, I was just talking, to talk to get elected. Like, even for, like, Biden, for example, he was promising, like, a full student loan forgiveness, like, his first year in office. That never happened at all. Like, and then there's presidents like, Obama, who's making promises like, oh, we'll get out of the Middle East under my presidency. Never happened either. In fact, quite the opposite. He was just drone striking. So he just took troops out, but he still, like, drone striked and did collateral damage. And, like, I think we talked about this offline of Trump too. Like, he made big embellishing promises about, like, a wall being built. Like, that never happened. And it's less of like the policy, whether you think the policy is morally good or bad. It's more that nobody actually goes through with what they says. Like, if you want me to be honest, I'd have a lot more respect for, like, you know, a Democrat, Republican president if they went forth and actually did what they promised. But none of them do. It's just basically lip service for you to vote for them, and that's why I think it's like always a failed system. That's really just my view in general. Like, the older I get, the more I've been like very anti-democratic in that sense, where I just think the whole system of democracy is stupid.
Yeah,
where it just incentivizes the worst of people and incentivizes, you know, groupthink and tribal warfare, and that doesn't help us as a nation, as like a people. Because at the end of the day, like, I'm sorry, but like, you know, if you're a United States citizen, you're a United States citizen. Period. Like, that's it. And you could talk to Republicans who say like, "Oh, Democrats aren't real people. They're not real citizens." You know, go to our camp, you'll hear like Democrats say, "Oh, Republicans, they're not real citizens. They're not real people." It's just very disgusting and disheartening conversations. Yeah, but that's just my take on all that.
I definitely think extremism definitely breeds an articulation of the opposition being inhumane or doesn't provide empathy towards the notion of people being human. But I often look at policy and the declarations that are often made on the campaign trail as being tantamount to going into a jeweler and proclaiming a certain price for the item you wish to sell. You know you're not going to get that ask for price, but you're going to get something down the line of what you knew you would get or what you're actually striving for. For example, someone can go in there and say, I want to get this for $20,000. But they know that the more sensible selling for the thing they have is like 15. They basically get bartered down to it, but they're like, that's why I wanted it to begin with. Even if they get 13 or 14, it's still in the range pit of what they were aiming for also to begin with. In terms of executive orders, when it comes to Biden, the Muslim removing the Muslim ban was an insanely like important thing for people to not create division and animosity. The executive order to revisit immigration policy, especially some of his executive orders due to the Keystone XLR permit, and that was primarily one that dealt with climate change. Even people who are really in the LGBTQ community had things that were positive, such as the banning of discrimination on the basis of gender and sexual orientation. That was reinforced by Biden's,
yeah, I think that was a horrible decision they made, if you want me to be honest.
Well, we're both from both different. We're both from both different.
No, hear me out. The reason I say that is because I think Thomas Sowell summed it up pretty well about. I don't really agree with a lot of what he says, but he made one good point where it was like his opinion on like affirmative action or these policies that are like mandating or forcing people into certain things where you're doing it less because, you know, let's say there are LGBT. You're doing it more because you're checking a quota on a box, which is unfortunate, but that's where we are. And Soul will talk about, you know, like, hey, when I got my PhD and became a doctorate, I was respected in my field. That was before the whole affirmative action stuff. And then he says the reason why is because all these white yuppie kids in the rooms who got there by daddy's money knew I had to work my ass off twice as hard as they did, and therefore I earned it more than, like, you know, them. It was like I earned a right to be there. While, like, after post-affirmative action, a lot of these things were, you know, people being brought in these positions where, like, oh, so-and-so got here by a handout. And I'm not saying that's morally good or bad. I'm just saying that it is what it is type thing. That was the situation. And bills like these, like, you know, 1964 Act and Ford, like, directly go against a lot of constitutional bills, which is, like, making, like, the Constitution basically a useless piece of paper. I know Robinson and I, on our last episode, we talked about this for a while, basically, about, like, the Constitution, like, how far we've gone from it. But I've always just had a philosophy, like, hey, if you want to hire these people, you ought to be able to hire them, you know, and if you don't want to hire someone, you ought not to, like, want to hire them on whatever grounds, because I think it'd be silly or stupid for, like, let's say a Catholic rosary store, for example, to be forced to hire a they, them, you know, person of, like, you know, pink polka dot hair coming in and saying, I want to work here. Like, I don't want to force a person to do that, just as much as I don't want to force, like, you know, let's say an LGBT, you know, homeless shelter to have to work with, I don't know, like, an extremely devout, like, you know, Eastern Orthodox guy, or, like, you know, extremely devout Muslim who, like, sees these people as being highly moral. Like, why should I force these communities to like have to cater to these people? This doesn't make sense to me. That's just my general view of it.
But I would go back to like the underlying notion of like, well, Americans, and I think that if we're going to rock a banner of unification or unity in terms of striving towards an idea of how the country ought to be ran in terms of that unification, I think removing or dismissing people under these values feel kind of concerning, especially if, like, in the move to law that like the LGBTQ community in terms of like this landmark in Clayton County, like in Georgia last year, to extend protections of discrimination based on sex in the federal agency, including sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. I don't think that there's
That's the question. Why is that relevant for someone's field of work? Like, why should I know about your orientation or your sexuality in my job?
You're right.
I'm not saying
No
it to be a dick or
one
blunt.
knows.
Like, why
No
is
one
that even a
needs-
thing you considered? You know, like,
No one needs to know about these things. That's completely correct. However, the problem that emerges is often the notion that like someone could dismiss you on those grounds. So this is the unprotected ground that someone could dismiss you on that has nothing to do with your competency of that job. And so like that to me is a concerning as a religious fanatic who does all his practices and preaches off the job, off the campus, and it doesn't impede his work being dismissed on those bases alone. I was very much against like life ruination in the open 2020s when people were like searching for like political opinions that were espoused by some people online and trying to find a place of work. As much as I found myself distancing from people like Dave Chappelle in terms of his recent opinions, I still think that removing someone's ability to financially secure themselves is akin to killing them, which is why
no,
I think
I can understand that take. But what I'm saying though, it just doesn't answer the original question. You could avoid all these problems by simply not talking about your sexual orientation. Like, imagine if I walked into work tomorrow and I was like up and down the wall telling everyone like, "Hey guys, I'm so straight. I'm the straightest guy ever. I love being straight." Like, it's like weird. Why am I talking about that at work? You know, same as like, you know, all these LGBT people being like, "Oh, I'm so gay. I just love being gay. Gay. It's like, dude, why are you talking about this in a work?" It's kind of
Do you
like
think
what you mentioned about the religious fanatic. Like, sure, keep that stuff at your home where you can do all that stuff, but like, why is this in a workplace? Like,
But let's say like
yeah.
let's entertain the question in the confines of, let's say that the person might be non-binary but never speaks about it at work beyond the preferable pronouns, and let's say that the religious fanatic expresses nothing else about like the religious beliefs beyond having some sort of evangelical item upon themselves or like a cross, what have you. I think that if both of these people, just from these simple and very innocuous signifiers, are allowed to be terminated because they do not wish to work with these people, I believe that that definitely decimates the certain level of unity that I believe most people should be protected from.
This just goes back to what I'm saying. Like, why would you want to work at a place like that? Like, so let's say you have like, you know, a guy in this example we're talking about. The guy is like the dude, the hiring manager. He's like, you know, wearing a cross, and someone's like, you know, I have they them pronouns or whatever. It's like, if they don't feel comfortable working with them, why do you want to like force that where they're like forced to work in that environment? Like, if anything, it ought to be a natural conclusion or natural like brought in instead of like a forced brought in, because like you see historically there's trends of this. Anytime you like force diversity, you force any of these actions or bills come back, it has more negative harm than good. So I'm like not, obviously my opinion is that people who tend to be like isolationists, they die out. So if you want to have your little right-wing religious extremist group, you're gonna die out. I'm sorry, that's just a fact. Because that's how, you know, capitalism runs, baby. Like, I'm gonna buy from the guy who's gonna advertise to all customers compared to one who only advertise to a small group. And
But do you believe
Yeah.
in do you create caveats or exceptions on proportionality? Any chance?
in what regards?
Like, for example, what we just spoke about, are we talking about like, oh well, a mom and pop shop has every right to dismiss a worker no matter how exceptional they are at the job, on the basis of them not liking a non-binary person or religious person, for a matter. Similarly to a place like Walmart doing the same thing on the same grounds.
Yeah, I believe in a freedom of association in the sense where I'd even go as far as say I'm okay if there are stores that say like blacks only and like I'm not allowed in there. I'd be okay with them running that business. I wouldn't care. Like at the same day, because my thought process is okay, you guys can have this store, but you're gonna go out of business. So here's a perfect example. I know in Portland, Oregon, these two feminists opened up a restaurant and they had something called a man tax, where for everything a man in there bought, it was $1.25, 27 cents more expensive than a woman. Guess how long this place stayed open? 3 months, and it shut down immediately. You know why? Because why do I want to go there and spend extra money and pander to you when I can go to a store that's going to charge me a fair same price? And that's what gets frustrating and stuff, where it's like, I just don't, why am I forced to associate with these people? Like, our country was built on that freedom of association. You shouldn't be forced to be put with people you don't want to be around.
I do believe that like there's a certain level of freedom of association, but also terms and flagship phrases like the world in of itself being a melting pot, America being in that melting pot, and exceptions of like people of different creed and different practices and different beliefs, or like an implicit element of, well, all men being created equal in the land of this nature, in this nature.
Yeah, and I agree with that.
So,
I believe all men are created equal. I'm not against that concept. What I'm just simply stating is that this goes back to like the 1964 Civil Rights Act, where it directly contradicted and violated the Constitution, where the Constitution says all men have a right of freedom of association. And what they did was they took that, they said, okay, we're going to ignore this doctrine and put like a little asterisk next to it, being like, unless Big Daddy government tells you got to be around these people. And that's basically what it's been like in America ever since, which is unfortunate. Like, and like I said,
I can say that definitely the example you provided was inoperable to some degree.
Well, how so?
I'm saying in terms of like the man tax, like not only would that create natural animosity amongst people that were living there, but like you're cutting off half of the population that would naturally come to these businesses. However, if we were to take this to like a racial tint of some sorts, like if there was a town, like let's say somewhere in the South or just Midwestern, and had a predominantly large white population, they
economically die out. That's exactly where I'm getting at. So let me give you an example. If you ever look up the charts in GDP and the economics of Jim Crow era South, it was horrible. I hate to say it, but the North was crushing the South like 3-1 in economics, where the South was like dying and Jim Crow was dying on his way out. Like, it was already on his last leg, because I hate to say it, but again, going back to this whole conversation, why as me, as a consumer, do I want to go to this business that's going to discriminate against myself or, you know, other people I care about, when I could simply go to the business that lets everyone in? And that's the difference from natural inclusion and forced government inclusion is what I'm getting at. So, like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, you know, there should be mom and pop shops that have whites only, blacks only signs out because, you know, I believe in it. No, I want these to happen because I want them to naturally die out, because that's what's going to happen. We've seen historically and economically, these places do not last long and they die. And that's the whole point I'm trying to get at, is like, you know, a lot of times you gotta follow the money, and the money isn't gonna be there for long because no one's going to be in that area. Yeah. Hell, there was a mass exodus of like a lot of people, especially 1930s and 40s in the South, where they all went north or they went to California or went west. Because why do you want to be down there? It's like it's an economic shithole if you're actively discriminating or screwing us over. You know? That's my view on that.
My follow-up question would be the following. Do you believe that, like, when you talk about natural dying out of certain ideas, do you think that the government could look at the natural dying out of those ideas and then enforce a law that is representative of a progression within society to believe implicitly that is wrong? Or are you just the idea of it being legislated into law is the issue for you?
So I say government ought to reflect morality. Government ought not to enforce morality. Government's only job is to have legality and have legality reflected through morality, but they shouldn't enforce their own on it. So let it be natural by the people. That's my general view of that. So
You said reflected of morality, like it shouldn't be the enforcement of. You said, wait, please reiterate that to me again.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
sorry. So government
Capacity.
should be, or government ought to be the reflection of morality. It should not be the enforcement. An example of government being the enforcement of morality is, let's go to Jim Crow South, where a lot of the policies by Jim Crow in the South were enforced by government institutions and not private sectors. Because of that, the private sectors in these communities all died out or were dying and suffering because guess what? It was harming business. Nobody feels comfortable in a sundown town, and no one's going to stay there long. And the people who do stay there die out because no one's going to be in these areas when, hey, the grass is greener up north or on the west, I'm just going to go there. And that's the unfortunate truth of this scenario, but that's what I'm saying, like, going back to these things, government enforcing morality never tends to be a good thing.
The follow-up example I was going to ask was how, in your articulation of it, how does government look like a reflection of morality?
Government looking like a reflection of morality?
Mhm.
So I would say basic fundamental principles for America, like the Constitution. So like we already established earlier that all men are created equal. Government should reflect that. It should reflect, also that all men have the right of free association, as in you could be around who you want to be around, and your basic fundamental rights. So like you have the right to speech. These are your natural rights, as in you were born with these rights. You were born with the ability to speak. You were born with the ability to go places you want to go. Like that shouldn't be a right taking away from you that you're born with. And that's what I mean with like reflection of morality.
You think that some speech should be protected?
That what?
Do you believe that some speech should be protected?
Species?
Do you think that some speech should be protected?
Oh, you said speech. What do you mean by protected?
As in, there is some opinions that can be exercised in common parliaments that should be protected by ensuring that people feel safe enough to express them, that there be no harm come to them, lest there be repercussions for the opposing party. Do you think that there is some?
Can you give me an example?
Say for instance that someone in the United States just wants to say that they believe that something is injurious, like women do pottery better or something like that. Like, do you believe that? I'm going for the most absurd example here. Pottery do better. Do you think that woman deserves to have her speech protected by law to ensure that she's not like retaliated violently by a misogynist or like a lunatic?
Yeah, by protected, if you mean, like I said earlier, that reflects what I was saying, where speech, you were God-given these things, or let's replace the word God-given for people who are agnostic. You were naturally born or naturally given these things, as in you intuitively came to the ability to speak. That is something that you have, that you should be able to keep. In the sense of like government, if we're going to entertain the idea of a government existing, it ought to be there to protect these very basic, fundamental, natural things. So the ability to speech. So yeah, I'd say, someone wants to say, hey, I think, X is better than Y. They should be allowed to say so. Like, I see no reason why. Yeah.
So you would consider yourself like a free speech absolutist. Like anything that doesn't, anything caveating the notion that anything's a blatant lie spoken or emerged.
I wouldn't even say that. No, I'd say like let that be up to the community less than the government. Like, I say, so example, I could say free speech absolutist in the sense that you could say what you want, but it doesn't mean you're like inescapable of consequence. So if I think it should be legal for an example, a guy to go in a public square in like a town and say the most profane, absurd things and libel or slander about someone. And I think also if the community wants to cast that person out, they should, in all of their right, do so because they have the freedom to associate and not associate with that person. So I'm okay with that. Like, let's say I went to the public square and I was saying like crazy things like deaf to X group, and a predominant population of that town was X group. I would not find it immoral whatsoever for them to kick me out of that town. Like, I still want the government to allow me to say what I want to say. I think government should allow free speech absolutism. But in the same breath, like, I'm not ignorant to the possibility or exemption of like, consequence. Like, of course there's going to be consequence that carries with what you say, So I say it like that.
What recourse does someone have for someone who is, for example, doesn't have the financial avenues or doesn't have the populace at large on their side for defamatory statements that do have a negative impact on them in the sense that it's a tangible harm on their living, such as the inability to financially sustain themselves or even file a lawsuit in retaliation? What sort of recourse could they refer to? If
Could you give me an example again?
Like, let's say, for instance, my pillow guy somehow finds himself in a decline in a society where a lie is birthed, where they say he's a Nazi, and not only populist support doesn't help him, but most populist support is against him, and he doesn't have the financial wherewithal to bring a suit forward, despite what's occurring is a lie if brought to court, but he doesn't have the finances to bring to court. Like, what sort of recourse should that individual aspire to, or like direct themselves to?
Okay, so I'm gonna try to repeat back what you said. So if a guy says he's a Nazi or someone calls him a Nazi, and he believes it to be false, and he doesn't have money to bring it to court.
Yeah, he has like tangible like damages to his living arrangements, and he has no ability to financially recoup, and he doesn't have the ability to financially retaliate. What sort of recourse does that individual have in this confine?
Well, I know now you're getting to like justice system stuff, and constitutionally it says that you are provided, with like an attorney or a lawyer in your defense, and this goes into like civil court. So if he finds a person on that, he could be able to fight back on that. I don't see an issue with that if he can't afford it. Or they could be held for libel or slander. Like, that person who calls him a Nazi still has the right and freedom of speech to call him a Nazi. But going back to what I was saying again, that doesn't negate him being a right to avoid consequences. So if like the My Pillow guy was like, oh, someone called me a Nazi, I took him to court and I won libel damages. I got $300K. Good for him,
Mm-hmm. Usually when I look over these topics of recourse, I usually think usually governmental bodies are usually a secondary operative for societies, usually for the have-nots to some degree. It's usually like a secondary element of protection for people who might not have the retaliatory recourse afforded to them because of whether it's a financial occurrence or there is a exploitation by higher powers that might not be state or government, but just maybe company oriented or like greater powers in that regard. For example, Johnson & Johnson, I believe around 2006, was shown to be testing upon elderly and the young. They had to pay a debt. I believe Johnson & Johnson was sued. I'm not quite sure. I don't remember how much they had to pay.
It was roughly like $3 billion. I remember something like that happening.
Yeah, they had to pay an exorbitant amount of money, but for a company of that size and of that power in terms of what they could exercise, no single individual could ever afford to do so. It had to be something of a collective or state power that could have helped them ensure that Johnson & Johnson served any tangible punishment for their action.
I mean, this is just going into corporations, not individuals now. I feel like that's a completely different topic.
But corporations are a collective of individuals, correct? Like, there's some...
No, but what I'm saying is that we went from, the My Pillow guy versus one person to a multi-billionaire conglomerate corporation to, I guess, one person. And let me see. I mean, you could still bring him forth, and that would go into crim law then, I think, because you're saying they actually had harm to patients. So, if you bring that forward and show that they actively lied, that's not really would that be a civilian law issue or a criminal law issue? I'd have to think about that one over. But yeah, it's weird because I know in the United States, for some reason, I don't know why, but like corporations could also be viewed as people. Like there was some Supreme Court case in the 70s that ruled that, which is like really, really weird. But I don't know. Like I said, that gets into more dicey legal stuff that's like, out of my pay grade. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't think I'd be able to give you a solid answer to that one.
All right. And neither one of us are getting paid for this. In all honesty, if I'm being honest about that, but in terms of some recourses, yeah,
I think I can't believe we were talking this long. Hey, sorry about that. Yeah. So yeah. I was just enjoying the conversation. My bad, man. We're just rolling.
No, we're fine. We're having an excellent conversation. I've always liked these.
I'm sorry to keep you up this, buddy.
we brought up a myriad of topics. We had a little sparring as training as towards the end of it, where we I think we've always talked about how we politically delineate from one another. I think having those type of moments where we butt heads really shows.
I mean, it's good. I say it like this: iron sharpens iron. Like, hopefully, you walk away thinking like, okay, this is something I didn't consider, and vice versa. Like, I wasn't really thinking about the corporate
fighting guy. I'm a writing with fighting guy. I'm a governmental shill. I'm really.
Yeah, cast me dead, brave voting for any of these people. But yeah, I get what you're saying though. Like,
state power, my guy.
Yeah, I'm not voting for the orange man. I'm not voting for a dementia dude. I'm good.
Yes, but hopefully, all of you at home enjoyed this episode of Requiem Radio. With season 3, we hope to bring you more unique guests, more unique topics, and subject matters that you can tune into at any time and find something to engage with. But as usual, I'm Hazy Dialects with my co-host, Solo Requiem. Would you like to close out?
Oh, would you be okay if I add one more thing too?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so first off, to the viewers and people who listen to these episodes, I want to say thank you. We've come a long way. We got a lot more to go. I enjoy doing this, something I really enjoy. I enjoy being with Hazy and talking about myriad topics, but it would really help out too if you could help us sometimes in algorithm. It's probably going to be the only time I'm going to say it because I think it's corny saying this, but like, hey, if you could share us around with a friend or, give us shoot us some stars on whatever platform, I guess Spotify. That comes a long way and it helps out a bunch, but that'd be greatly appreciated, and hopefully, down the road we could get even bigger in this. But that's all for me.
And as usual, you've seen us all in HD. Thank you.